The House will come to order. Conference Committee on House Files.
Conference Committee report on House File number 1937, an act relating to state government establishing a budget for the Department of Military Affairs. The report is addressed to the Honorable Melissa Hortman, Speaker of the House, and the Honorable Bobby Joe Champion, President of the Senate. We, the undersigned conferees for House File number 1937, report that we have agreed upon the item in dispute and recommend as follows. The report is signed by 3 out of the 3 members on the part of the House and 3 out of the 3 members on the part of the Senate. Newton moves that the report of the Conference Committee on House File number 1937 be adopted and that the bill be repassed as amended by the Conference Committee.
Representative Newton, to your motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That is my motion. This is essentially the same bill that we passed unanimously just a few weeks ago. 2 small changes. We have some provisions for Representative Edelman in the bill, and we took out a provision for Representative Garofalo that I'll continue to work on in the bill. But other than that, it's the same bill that we lit up the screen in green a couple weeks ago, and I'd appreciate it if you do it again. Thank you.
Discussion on the Newton motion to adopt the Conference Committee report. Representative Johnson. Representative who? The member from Washington? Representative Weens.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Unfortunately, I was in one of those fresh and mistake discussions right before you called my name. It won't happen again, I promise. I rise to support the omnibus bill. Voted for it before, but today one thing I wanted to do was just a word of thanks. Today is the 78th anniversary of Victory in Europe Day. To all our World War II veterans, they're passing at a tremendous rate. I've got a couple that have just passed since I've taken the oath and come into this chamber, and I just wanted to speak their names and their stories. The first one is Walt Straka. Walt Straka, he was a battling bastard of Bataan. Fought the initial invasion, was captured, survived the Bataan Death March, the hell ships, and the death camps to come back to Minnesota, build a family and a career, and just passed away a couple months ago. Also, Jim McDougall, just a couple of weeks ago, Jim flew a PBY as a crew chief, South Pacific, delivering MacArthur's final invasion orders for the Philippines. And just a true American spirit. When I take a look at what we're doing with the Veterans Bill, not just honoring those World War II veterans that I have such fond memories of, but also I have to mention the silent generation, the Korean War veterans. Last time I spoke just about the World War II veterans, I had a Korean vet tell me, hey, we served too. So with all the veterans that have previously served, thank you for your service. And on to the bill. I'm voting green on this bill. It does so many good things. There's one however piece. There is something that I worked with Chair Newton, Lead Bliss, and the rest of the members on, and that is the provisions for responsible, accountable, transparent oversight as we go forward. Unfortunately, that's missing from this bill. And I think, you know, in this advent of this time where we've seen some fraud, waste, and abuse, the one thing that we don't want to do is re-victimize any of our veterans or our citizens, because that breaks down the public trust in this institution as well as our government. And at this time, when we seem sometimes divided, we can do something good together in a bipartisan manner. And I would just like to see this going forward next year or some future time, Chair Newton, where we can get this in, because I think it's a good thing. We trust the Veterans Administration and our military affairs folks to execute the funds that they've been given in a judicious and fiscally responsible way. And we think that we need to be public about that. And having a reporting mechanism that's standardized, I think, gets to that point. So in closing, I'd like to say thank you again, Chair Newton, for your work getting this through, and I'm voting green. I recommend everybody vote green on this. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Seeing no further discussion on the Newton motion to adopt the conference committee report on House File 1937, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The clerk will give the bill its third reading as amended by conference.
Third reading, House File number 1937, as amended by conference.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. There being 131 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed as amended by conference and its title agreed to. Conference Committee report on House files.
Conference Committee report on House File number 2335, an act relating to housing. The report is addressed to the Honorable Melissa Hortman, Speaker of the House, and the Honorable Bobby Joe Champion, President of the Senate. We, the undersigned conferees for House File number 2335, report that we have agreed upon the items in dispute and recommend as follows. The report is signed by 2 out of the 3 members on the part of the House and 2 out of 3 members on the part of the Senate. Howard moves that the report of the Conference Committee on House File number 2335 be adopted and that the bill be repassed as amended by the Conference Committee.
I recognize the author of the bill, Representative Howard, who will explain the Conference Committee report.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this is a home run of a housing bill. And with its passage, thousands of Minnesotans will be able to open the door to their very own home, one they can afford, one that gives them peace of mind, economic security, and a better shot at a hopeful future. This is a big, big deal. It's a truly historic moment in bill, and there are just so many people that I need to thank before describing what's in the bill. First, I want to thank Speaker Hortman for putting her trust in me to chair this Housing Committee. It has been an honor, and to my whole caucus for this opportunity to lead on such an important issue. I want to thank my Vice Chair, Esther Egbaje, who has just been a fierce champion and partner all along the way, and reiterate my thanks to all of our committee members and Minority Leader Johnson. I want to thank our Team Housing. I'm a first-term chair, and it was wonderful to have a team that always seemed to have my back and know how to answer my questions and to do this work together. Adam Kopel, our amazing CA, who deserves credit for being the CA to get both the first 2 omnibus to the finish line here. That's the gold and the silver. I want to thank Abdullahi, our CLA, Molly Peterson, our House researcher, our nonpartisan staff, Justin Cope, Joe Harney, Mary Davis. This team is so dedicated, so talented, and so committed to this work we do, which is going to have an impact on people's lives, and I'm just immensely grateful. I'm also thankful to Governor Walz and Lieutenant Governor Flanagan for putting a bold housing budget together, and I especially want to thank Commissioner Ho for her leadership and her work all this session, and especially in these last few steps as we work together to come to agreement on a truly transformational bill. The team at Minnesota Housing is also a group that is talented and committed to this work. Many folks that have been doing this work at Minnesota Housing for years and now have the opportunity to help implement this amazing, bold budget. I have to thank Ryan Baumtrog, Dan Kitzberger, Lael Robertson, and Amanda Welliver for their talents, their time, their work this session together. I know we're not supposed to talk about the other body, but I also need to thank my partner in the Senate, Senator Lindsay Port, and her CA, Davin Suckup, and her amazing staff. I had a reporter ask me the other day, what are sort of the hang-ups, negotiation, what are the tough parts you're trying to work through? And, you know, I had to pause a minute and say, that's really not the approach we've taken, in part because we shared a vision and shared a collaborative problem-solving mindset. It was a partnership all across the way to get to this bill, and it's a better bill. Okay, I'll stop gushing about the Senate now. The other folks I need to thank is there's so many fingerprints on this bill for people that have been leading on housing, not just this session, but for years and years and years. First and foremost, I want to thank our former chair, Alice Hausman. In many ways, Alice was the originator of what I would say is this push over the last many years to finally take real action on housing. We wouldn't be here at this moment without Alice. And I want to thank the Homes for All Coalition, a group of advocates from across the state that really rose up, banded together many years ago after a session when nothing happened on housing. Their work has helped lead us to this point, and I want to thank a few specific leaders in that movement that have been working tirelessly for years: Libby Murphy, Carrie Johnson, Michael Dahl, Annie Shapiro, and there are so many more. And I want to thank all the Minnesotans who came and testified this session and shared your stories. We are listening. That is at the center of why we're taking action on this bill. This is your victory as well. And it's your work that have brought us to this historic moment. We are taking this historic step because, members, the status quo of our housing market is failing Minnesota. Minnesotans are looking for a starter home and coming up empty. There's such a scarcity of affordable rental housing that family homelessness is up over 200% in Hennepin County, and 500,000 Minnesotans can't afford their homes. The housing market has failed in greater Minnesota. There's simply not the workforce housing being built that we need, and Minnesota has one of the worst racial homeownership gaps in the country. We as a legislature could say, you know, hashtag not our problem. This is an issue that shouldn't be addressed at the legislative level. This isn't our role. Of course, that's what we've largely been doing. In one of my first years here at the legislature, we spent more new money to house animals at the Minnesota Zoo than we put into the Minnesota housing budget. But this is a new day. This bill represents our most ambitious historic effort to address our housing crisis, investments that begin with a B, making huge strides all across our housing continuum, from preventing homelessness to creating new pathways to home ownership. And I want to share the highlights of what is included in this bill. First, I am so proud that for the first time ever, we are funding state-based rental vouchers to help provide housing stability for thousands of families all across the state. This is the Bring It Home Minnesota housing plan that so many members have co-signed onto and worked over many years. When we brought this bill to the floor, I mentioned that there are over 200,000 children living in cost-burdened homes. And what our Bring It Home Minnesota housing voucher will do will help fill the gap created where the federal government is missing its mark in terms of funding Section 8 housing vouchers. That transformational piece for Minnesota families to be able to afford stable housing will be life-changing, and this bill will fund more than 5,000 of those vouchers for families every year into the future. It is an absolute life-changing game changer. Two, we're investing in supportive housing. We're creating an innovative new program championed by our Commissioner, Jennifer Ho, to support the housing providers who are doing some of the most heaviest lifting for our most vulnerable Minnesotans with strengthening the supportive housing model. We're also investing in resources to stabilize some of the housing providers who were hit the hardest during the pandemic. Resources that will be put right back into the housing that will improve the experience for those Minnesotans that they care about, Minnesotans that they serve. Members, this is the most ambitious bill the legislature has ever seen to produce more housing, which is so critical. We need to build more homes. We have one of the largest gaps, supply-demand gaps, and more than half of this bill will be directed to housing production, from rental housing to home ownership to manufactured housing from border to border. $200 million in housing infrastructure bonds, nearly $100 million in challenge, two of the most flexible tools that will build housing all across the state. We are making significant investments to build new homes to own, an area that Chair Hassan is led on with home ownership investment grants. And we're, for the first time ever, putting real dollars to preserve the affordable homes we already have, almost $100 million in our NOAA Impact Fund. This is going to prevent the displacement of thousands of Minnesota residents and have such an impact. We're also taking a statewide approach, making significant investments in Greater Minnesota with a 10 times increase in funding specifically directed to Greater Minnesota for workforce housing and a new innovative infrastructure program that will help communities pay for the infrastructure they need as they invest in new affordable housing. Members, this is also the most ambitious bill to create new homeowners that the legislature has ever seen. Vice Chair Agbaje has done so much heavy lifting and leading to create a nation-leading first-generation home ownership down payment assistance program. We invest $100 million in that program. It will create more than 4,000 new first-generation homeowners. We also have significant other down payment assistance resources in this bill. And as I mentioned, we're building more homes. We need to produce more homes along with providing that assistance. Over $60 million specifically directed to build new affordable single-family homes. I mentioned manufactured housing. Representative Norris has led tremendously as we invest in infrastructure grants and other programs designed to help both rehab, improve, and create more manufactured housing, our state's largest source of affordable home ownership. And members, we're not leaving this session without making ongoing investments to address our housing crisis. This bill does include a quarter-cent Metro-wide sales tax that will be used to fund the most pressing affordable housing challenges in our 7-county metro area. These funds will help us build 1,000 new units of affordable rental housing and 1,000 new units of affordable home ownership, providing those resources largely to the cities and counties that know the unique challenges in their community. In addition, that resource will help us fund the rental vouchers that I talked about earlier. Members, whether we're talking about narrowing the achievement gaps in our schools, whether we're talking about creating economic security or improving health outcomes, all roads truly lead back to home. This bill is historic, will make such a difference, and I look forward to the debate and discussion this afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Discussion on the adoption of the conference committee report. Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And well, Chair Howard, I love a good baseball reference. I would disagree that this is a home run. I might categorize this more as about 5 or 6 foul balls followed by chasing a ball that's down and away and striking out. I think that if I did my math correctly, about 17% of the total bill goes to actually build new houses. And I think that the imposition of a sales tax is troubling. You know, we've beat this one for a long time. Members, I would urge a no vote for a lot of reasons. That this really doesn't fix the inventory problem that we have. It doesn't. And we haven't done any regulatory reform on how to do that. And we talked about that on Housing Bill Day, so I won't belabor that point either. But I will say, Mr. Chair, that my North Star analogy is true, I think, and people believe that, but we're missing the mark here. We're not building enough homes. We're not fixing some of the regulatory issues. We're putting too much money into effectively renting people apartments when I worry about what happens if we see a downturn in the economy and what happens then. I really worry about overtaxation on this issue, and for that reason, and many, many others, I am going to urge a no vote, but I will say I appreciate the openness and the frank dialogue that we've had. I appreciate you keeping the translation piece in the bill because that's important for people who are going to enter into contracts relative to either going to an apartment or seeing some formal document that gets put in front of them that you kept that provision in there because they should be able to have that translated into their first language. So I will urge members to vote no. It is indeed chasing a pitch down and away for a strikeout. Thank you.
The member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Speaker Hortman. And Representative Howard, over the weekend I had the opportunity to speak with one of the builders up in the North Metro, and they have purchased some land to develop in Somerset, Wisconsin. And what he told me is he can build the same house in Somerset, Wisconsin for $20,000 less. And until we start addressing what some of the core issues that are preventing home ownership are, such as excessive codes and requirements that go into building a house in Minnesota, we're not going to fix the inventory problem. And this bill does nothing toward that. Members, it's not a good bill. It's raising taxes in the metro area unnecessarily. None of the, at least my county of Anoka, did not ask for a tax increase countywide. We don't need another new tax. We've got a $17.5 billion surplus. And would Representative Howard yield for a question, Madam Speaker?
He will. Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Howard, I sit on Ways and Means, and at every committee meeting that we've had going over all these budget bills, we've had an amendment that goes on that whenever we're giving money to nonprofits, it addresses some oversight over those nonprofits. And I saw on both the Veterans Bill and on this one that language was removed. And I'm wondering, Representative Howard, if you could address the reasoning for removing language that would oversee the money, the billions of dollars, I believe, this legislative session going to nonprofits. Representative Howard.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Scott. As I understand, and in consultation with folks, you on Ways and Means, we did this sort of for every budget bill. As I understand, we're going to take an approach where that is going to be in the state government bill applying to the entire overarching budget. So it's a matter of efficiency. I think we'll have it in one place in the state government bill versus littered through all these omnibus bills.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Howard, thank you for that. I think it's a really important amendment that was added on each bill, and I understand wanting to put it just once in the statute book so we're not printing more books unnecessarily. But I know that our side of the aisle will be watching for that language to show up in the state gov finance bill. It's really important language. We are seeing money going to nonprofits this session in unprecedented fashion, and I don't know how we're going to keep up with it, even with that language, but with the oversight of it, but I think that's really important language. Members, please vote no.
The member from Chisago, Representative Johnson. I'm sorry, the member from Isanti, Representative Johnson.
Madam Speaker, members, Representative Howard, I'm really disappointed in this bill. You called it a home run. It might have gone over the fence near the left field foul pole, but it was left of it. It was a foul ball. One thing that we talked about on our side of the aisle in committee was accountability. Representative Scott brought up the fact that not only that piece, what was in both the House and the Senate file, mysteriously disappeared in the conference committee report. It was an agreed upon language that's gone. Holding accountability nonprofits to make sure they're using the funds properly. In fact, earlier this year, we received the OLA report on nonprofit organizations receiving grants. And accountability was a big issue. In fact, a couple of the highlights is statutes provide little authority to enforce state agencies' compliance with grant management requirements or require corrective action when agencies are non-compliant. That was an easy thing to fix, yet it's not there. And the other recommendation is the legislature should increase external oversight of grant management in the executive branch agencies, which means we need to hold our executive branch accountable. We are the fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers of this state, and there was an amendment put on in the original bill that was taken out in conference committee that gave us that oversight. Again, a foul ball. That's just some of the things that are missing in this bill. There's nothing in this conference committee report to increase our housing stock. Minnesota has one of the lowest housing stock in the country. We're way short. We need a lot of new housing. But in this bill, out of $1 billion, maybe 17% max could be used for new houses, and that includes some rental. 17% out of $1 billion is only for new housing stock. That's not helping the citizens of Minnesota, especially those in greater Minnesota where we have a big issue. Very little to help out of $1 billion for workforce housing. You go to any city across this great state outside of the 7-county metro area, that's what they're asking for. That's what they need. Earlier today, I checked on Indeed for employment. There was over almost 125,000 job openings on Indeed this morning. A lot of those companies have specialty requirements. Looking for the right person. They finally find that person, but there's no place for them to live because they don't live in that area, so they cannot take the job. That doesn't help our small town communities. It actually hurts them. Yes, you did increase the amount, but it was drastically short of what it needs. Some other issues we have with the OLA report. One of the things they said is it's not a good idea to name a particular nonprofit to get the funding. Yet in this conference committee report, there's 13 nonprofits specifically named to receive funds, totaling over $150 million. And they can use 10% of that for a minimum for administration fees. That's $1.5 million. And that's probably the most egregious thing that they did in this bill is they're increasing taxes. We have $17.5 billion surplus, and you're increasing taxes. Granted, it's only 0.25%, but guess what? When you pay that bill, they always round it up. So if it's $4.01, you pay the same tax you pay on $8. Because you round up. $4 would be a 1 penny. $4.02 would be 2 pennies, because you round up. And the taxes in the 7-county metro area, which is especially hard on those that you're trying to help, because the vast majority of this fund is going to go to Minneapolis and St. Paul. You can see that in how the bill is written. In fact, it says at one point in this bill, although the statute says it should be evenly divided across the state, but there's a rider on there. If more help is needed in the metro area, they can defer the funds to that area. The needs across the state are many, but what is needed is different. This bill is specifically tailored to just one area of the state, with the vast majority of the funds going to that, mostly rental. We need to change that. All this is giving money, handing out money and not helping people. Gives them a short-term help, but doesn't make them help them get out of their situation to help them help them make their lives better. Members, this bill has a long ways to go to get where it's usable, and it will actually help the vast majority of Minnesotans. Let's send this back to conference committee so we can actually have a conference committee. We met, did the side-by-side last Monday. The next time we met and that the minority heard anything was last night at 9:15 when an agreement had been reached. Conference committee did not meet and talk about any of the issues. No opportunity for me, the only member on that conference committee report that represents the 80 counties outside the metro area, could talk, defend some of the positions, offer amendments to make it better, and for the greater Minnesota actually have a voice in what was going on in the housing bill. It's very disappointing. I would say everybody should send this back so that all of Minnesota has a voice in what's going on in this conference committee, instead of a couple people telling us how it's going to be. So please vote red and send this back to conference committee. Thank you.
The member from Chisago, Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Is Representative Cleaborn on the floor? I don't see her at her desk. But
She's not. Representative New Brindley.
Is Representative Hewitt on the floor? Or is he
He's not. Representative New Brindley.
All right, so we don't have anyone who can actually confirm that there will be accountability language somewhere. Is there anyone who can confirm?
Representative Howard can confirm that.
Well, Representative Howard confirmed that it is not in this bill, and he confirmed that his understanding is that it will be in the state government bill. So I was hoping to ask our state government folks if it is indeed their intention to include it in the state government bill, because I'll be honest, you know, we talked a lot about accountability, and that was the one thing that every Republican wanted to make sure, that we had nonprofit accountability in all of these bills. And now the very first bills we're seeing, we're removing the accountability language for our nonprofits. And it's nice that we have this idea that we think it's going to be in a bill later, but I'd like confirmation on that. That's a big deal, because if we don't know that it's going to be in that bill later, this bill should go back to conference now and get fixed. This bill, right now, in its current form, has zero accountability for all of the money it is sending to nonprofit organizations, none. And it is raising taxes, not just any tax. This is raising sales tax 0.25%. It is the most regressive tax we can put into place in this state. We are taxing low-income Minnesotans more than we are taxing high-income Minnesotans. That's what happens with a sales tax. Because as it turns out, people who don't have very much money spend every penny of it. And now they're going to pay more of it in taxes instead of on the goods and services they need. This bill is not ready for prime time. With all of its fanfare and adulation, it's a farce. We're raising taxes on people who can't afford it, and we're not doing anything to actually change the drivers, to actually change why it is so expensive to build homes in the state of Minnesota, why it costs 20 to 30% more to build a house in the state of Minnesota than it does in any of our surrounding states. This bill doesn't touch that. Instead, we're going to raise taxes so the government can subsidize it instead of fixing the problem. It's absurd. Madam Speaker, I'd like a roll call on this vote, please.
Representative New Brindley requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative New Brindley.
And with that, I would strongly suggest a no vote to send this bill back to conference committee, get rid of this tax nonsense, and add some accountability. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Seeing no further discussion on the Howard motion to adopt the conference committee report, the clerk will take the roll on the motion. The clerk will close the roll. There being 70 ayes and 61 nays, the motion prevails. The clerk will give the bill its third reading as amended by conference.
House File Number 2335, third reading as amended by conference.
Third reading as amended by conference. Discussion to passage. The member from Dakota, Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Oink, oink, oink. Yet again, we have another failure from the DFL this session. Despite a record budget surplus, we have the Democrats coming to us again, raising taxes. There's nothing new here, members. There's nothing historic. There's nothing ambitious. In fact, it's the same old, same old. Same old tax increases, same old liberals, same old Democrats.
Further discussion on passage. The member from Hennepin, Representative Howard.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just wanted to mention a few things from the debate and then look forward to our vote. First, related to the question about oversight, I have talked with our leaders, and this will be in the state government bill. One piece I'll note is a reason for that is we can make a statutory change versus a session law change. This makes the oversight stronger. I would think that's something we can all support. During the debate, it was raised that there isn't enough, there was some bad math, to put it kindly, about how much in this bill goes to production. More than half of the resources in this bill will help produce more units of housing. There was a question about the metro-wide sales tax and where that resource goes. We do have some runs we can get out, but this will be accessible all across the 7-county metro area. I would encourage folks to talk to your cities, talk to your counties. They are desperate to have resources. They know the community needs. There isn't the resource there. This sales tax will go directly to cities and counties to address the unique affordable housing challenges in their community. It's why more than 24 local elected officials from across the state, or from across the metro area, have put a strong letter of support. This is going to make a big difference in the long term. And to the piece about Greater Minnesota, members, this is sort of a put up or shut up moment if you want to support housing in Greater Minnesota. No bill that this legislature has ever considered has put more money directly into funding housing in Greater Minnesota. Let me say that again. There has never been a bill that this legislature has considered that would invest more funding in Greater Minnesota housing. This caucus, this team has prioritized funding for housing because when you actually talk to folks in Greater Minnesota, you hear that the free market has failed. You need public resource to fill the gaps to make financing work to build housing in Greater Minnesota. That's what we're doing in this bill. And members, I do get a little tired of hearing this sort of notion about we need to focus on this or that. You know how many bills that the other side of the aisle introduced that were referred to our committee this year to address housing? 3 bills. I was looking forward to getting bills heard and introduced and have that discussion. Members, you need to introduce bills if you want to solve these problems. This bill says we're going to work together and take on these challenges head on. It is historic and it will make a difference. As I close, I want to read a story from somebody who submitted theirs to us, and it's something I think we need to do more of, which is truly put ourselves in the shoes of the Minnesotans we are working to serve in this body. And so I want you, as I read this story, to put yourselves in the shoe of Amanda. Amanda is a mother of 3, a single mother of 3, and she told us this story. She said, I support creating a new Minnesota voucher program created in this bill because I have personally seen the transformational impact vouchers have. I have 3 kids, and we have experienced homelessness and housing insecurity. What changed all of this is when I received a voucher. I was able to move into a 3-bedroom, 2-bath apartment that provided enough space and stability for my family. My kids now go to a great school, and it has a huge impact on their lives. My youngest daughter is in 1st grade, and after missing half of kindergarten, she started not being able to read or write. Now she's caught up. Now my girl can read a whole book and write her name. My middle schooler has special education needs, and having a stable house has improved his emotional and social skills. He now has the confidence to be in the same classroom as his peers. My oldest son now gets to just be a high schooler, hanging out with his friends and playing on the football team. All of this is possible for my family because we have a voucher. Members, please think about that. Think about families in your district all across the state that are maybe working 2 jobs, maybe staying up late and working the night shift and not getting home from bedtime because the cost of housing is crushing. A voucher like the one that Amanda described, with this vote, we can make that life-changing voucher available to more than 5,000 Minnesota families every year. It is an amazing opportunity to use the power we have in this body to use it for something so powerful, which is the power of having a home that you can afford. Members, the last thing I want to say is that this bill is a beginning, not an end. It is the first step, the first time that this legislature has made a commitment anywhere near the scale or the scope of the problem we face across our state. But let this not be a step. Let this be a stride forward as we sprint to address our challenges in the affordable housing space, not just now, but into the future. The American dream evokes something different for many of us, but I think a lot of us believe that it begins at home. A place that is ours, a place that is safe, where we are free, but that dream is simply out of reach for far too many Minnesotans. In passing this bill, we unlock that dream for so many Minnesotans across the state. And I have to be honest, it kind of feels like a dream to get to carry this bill with all of you, and I ask you to dream with me and vote yes.
The clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. There being 70 ayes and 61 nays, the bill is passed as amended by conference and its title agreed to. Members, you know better than that. Come on now. Reports from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration.
Long from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration, pursuant to Rules 1.21 and 3.33, designates the following bills to be placed on the calendar for the day for Monday, May 8th, 2023, and establishes a pre-filing requirement for amendments offered to the following bills: House Files number 2888 and 402.
The first bill on the calendar for the day is House File 2988. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 2988, number 1 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to workers' compensation, the first engrossment.
I recognize the member from Sherburne, Representative Wolgamott, to explain the bill.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speakers. I rise to urge for your support of House File 2988, which is the bill that contains the 2023 recommendations for the Workers' Compensation Advisory Council. Now, Madam Speaker, for some of our newer members here in the House and for members of the public, before I get into the gist of what's in the bill, I would like the opportunity to explain what the Workers' Compensation Advisory Council is. The Workers' Comp Advisory Council, or the WCAC, is a unique creation that exists to review and recommend changes to our state's workers' compensation laws. The WCAC is made up of legislators. I'm a liaison for the House, and I'd also like to give a special shout out to my friend and fellow House liaison, the member from Wright, Representative McDonald, as well as members of the business community and from the representatives from the labor community. And it is administered by the Department of Labor and Industry. So special shout out to our Commissioner, Nicole Blissenbach. And Madam Speaker, I want to make clear that the WCAC, the beauty of it is that its recommendations are on a consensus basis. So everything that is in this bill has been approved by myself. It's been approved by my fellow liaison and co-author, Representative McDonald, and has been approved by members of the business and labor committees, as well as the Commissioner of Labor and Industry. So that's a little context about the WCAC. Now that we've established that, Madam Speaker, I'd like to get into what's in the bill. Here we go. This bill increases compensation for workers who experience a permanent partial disability. It calls on the Department of Labor and Industry to conduct a study to identify changes to improve the experience and outcomes for workers with work-related PTSD. And Madam Speaker, this bill appropriates $500,000, not from the general fund, but from the workers' compensation fund for the study. It also reduces the payments by insurers and employers to hospitals for outpatient services for injured workers. It clarifies when attorneys are available following a dispute on a claim. It establishes when an injured worker is provided with an item that is custom made for them, that is the property of the injured worker. It creates a schedule for fees medical records that healthcare providers can charge, and it authorizes the Department of Commerce to call the security deposit of private self-insured employers that file or declare bankruptcy and fail to pay required workers' compensation benefits. Again, Madam Speaker, I would urge your support and the support of the members of the chamber for this great legislation that is the full consensus of members from the business and labor community, as well as members from the Republican and Democratic caucuses from the House and Senate. That's what the bill does. That's why we're bringing it forward. And with that, Madam Speaker, I would be happy to stand for any questions related to House File 2988.
There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill a third reading.
Third reading, House File number 2988.
Third reading. Any further discussion? I recognize the Representative McDonald.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, I rise in support of the bill as well. Representative Wolgamott stated it very accurately. This is a very good bill. Members, this is what happens when good government comes together with industry and labor and hashes it all out off the House floor in committee over months. It comes to a unanimous agreement that this is the right thing to do for the Workmen's Comp Advisory Committee. So I think all of us members could probably learn from them, wouldn't you say, Representative Wolgamott? So, and also, since my son is a page here, I thought his old man should get up and at least say a few words on the bill, since I have an opportunity to speak on the lead as a lead. But anyway, a great bill. Again, the Chamber of Commerce, Industry and Labor, Commissioner Blissenbach, they all worked very hard. No offense, Representative Wolgamott, you and I didn't really do much of anything other than just nod and say, you're right, you're doing a good thing, keep up the good work. And now we get to vote in favor of this great piece of legislation. So thank you, Representative Wolgamott and the Advisory Committee. And Madam Speaker, that is all for now. I urge members to vote green.
Further discussion. Representative Wolgamott.
Well, Madam Speaker, before you instruct the Chief Clerk to take the roll on this great bill, I would just like to take a moment to thank all the members of the Workers' Compensation Advisory Council who, like Representative McDonald said, have put in hours and hours of work to put forward this great legislative product. I would like to thank Bill Schwind, Matthew Schmidt, President of the Minnesota Chamber, Doug Loon, David Heinrich, Gary Thaden, Margaret Hobbs, Robert Ryan, Bert Johnson, Ed Reynoso, Colin Beery, John Thorson, Bernie Burnham, as well as, again, Representative McDonald, and then our Senate counterparts, Senator Paul Utke, Senator Jennifer McEwen, and the best for last, Madam Chair, would really like to thank Commissioner Nicole Blissenbach for all of her hard work and leadership in leading the Workers' Compensation Advisory Council this year. Members, as Representative McDonald said, this is what consensus work looks like. I'm so proud and honored to be a part of the Workers' Compensation Advisory Council. Let's listen to our business community, let's have the backs of our workers, and let's pass this bill with a green vote. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 131 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. The next bill on the calendar of the day is House File 402. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 402, number 1 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to health, the fourth engrossment.
I recognize the author of the bill, Representative Bierman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, to serve the interests of your constituents and all Minnesotans, I'm asking your support to vote green on House File 402 today. Members, the bill does 3 things. First, this bill adds the public interest as a foundational principle for gauging the need and benefit of proposed healthcare mergers and acquisitions. Second, this bill requires nonprofit HMOs and nonprofit charitable health systems sold to out-of-state or for-profit entities to return their charitable assets to the state's general fund. This will protect billions of dollars of dedicated public assets obligated to Minnesotans' health care. The third part of this bill establishes that the University of Minnesota healthcare facilities must remain dedicated to the university's public healthcare mission. Members, this item may be one of the most important decisions we as a body make this term. Any one of these 3 issues is a compelling reason to vote green today. Members, dozens of states are addressing the accelerating market consolidation of healthcare mergers. With House File 402, we will have the tools to do that here in Minnesota as well. House File 402 will set some standards by asking the critical questions. Will a merger be in the public interest? Will it improve access? Will it promote quality care? And will it moderate the unsustainable cost increases? These are fundamental, measurable, desirable outcomes for all our constituents. The bill before you today will establish a process of notice, review, and approval of mergers and acquisitions organized around our Minnesota Department of Health and the Office of the Attorney General. Presently, most mergers and acquisitions are viewed as simply a business transaction. Now, I know there is a belief by many that the market cures all ills. Most anyone serving on a Health and Human Services Committee or the public that is tuned in today would acknowledge that there are gaps. Our healthcare system needs work, needs reform and change. Many people on both sides of the aisle have called our system broken. But by voting green on House File 402, we can create a better healthcare infrastructure based on the public interest and deliver better health outcomes no matter where you reside in the state. In the United States of America, we lead the world in biomedical research, cutting-edge medical technology. We have some of the world-leading medical hospitals and medical systems right here in Minnesota. And yet, due to coordination problems in a highly fragmented healthcare system of government and private sector entities, we continue to lag other nations in health outcomes, despite spending more on healthcare per capita by far than any other industrialized nation. In Minnesota, we need to be more proactive because the consequences of inaction are very clear and very predictable. If you have any doubt, I encourage you to read the National Academy of Sciences report titled Shorter Lives, Poorer Health. It's an update of American healthcare. An update just came out on it, and it is an excellent comparative study. It would be worth your time. Members, the second crucial issue of this bill is to safeguard the public assets of health maintenance organizations known as HMOs. Why is this important? Legally, a nonprofit holds charitable assets for the benefit of the public. That is the bargain we made in Minnesota with nonprofit HMOs back in 1973. As a state, we provide lucrative tax breaks and public health contracts, and the HMOs are obligated to use the profits of this arrangement for the improvement of public health in Minnesota. Presently, we have a moratorium on nonprofit HMOs converting to for-profit corporations. This will end July 1st unless we act. Should the moratorium end, HMOs could convert and hand public assets over to a for-profit company, removing these assets from the public benefit and making millions of dollars for executives without giving anything back to Minnesotans for all the years of our investment. This has happened across the nation, in Georgia, in Ohio, in California. Members, in one state, they learned the lesson the hard way. After losing public funds in 2 conversions, they changed the laws. And then they were able to retain $3.2 billion in assets in just 1 conversion case. Members, when well-regulated, conversions have resulted in turning those assets toward community benefits that has transformed the health and well-being of communities for the long term. House File 402 will extend the moratorium and commence a study by MDH of current law to review the regulations and guidelines surrounding the HMOs. The legislature can then hold hearings next session to ensure these public assets are retained. Right now, as I mentioned, these public assets are worth billions in Minnesota. Members, by voting green today, you are safeguarding the assets of your constituents and contributing to their better health. Another public asset being protected in House File 402 is the University of Minnesota Medical System. There have been bipartisan concerns related to the proposed merger between Fairview Health Services and South Dakota-based Sanford Health. This is a very important issue because as Minnesota's only land-grant institution, the U and all its assets are legally and morally obligated to the benefit of our state and our citizens. Charitable, philanthropic, and taxpayer dollars built a world-class academic health system. The mission of the continuum of medical care, treatment, teaching, and research at the University of Minnesota is our charge to preserve for citizens in this state. This should be nonpartisan. It has been nonpartisan among our former governors. Both former Dayton and former Governor Pawlenty have testified in favor of retaining control of our university by our state. And it was pointed out by former Governor Tim Pawlenty in a Senate hearing in March that there is no precedent for an out-of-state entity to control or own a state's academic medical center. No precedent. Members, Minnesota is known throughout the world for health care, and essential to that is a top-notch medical school. The U's medical school trains over 70% of Minnesota's physicians. Through health science programs, the U also trains over 70% of other health professionals, such as dentists, nurses, pharmacists, and a variety of other mid-level professionals who are critical to healthcare delivery across our state. Under the current dean, Dr. Jacob Tolar, the medical school recently jumped 9 slots to the 8th-ranked public medical school in the country. The ranking is a major achievement, as it is the school's highest ranking in over 25 years. Among all medical schools vying for the highly competitive NIH funding, the U of M is now ranked 21st. What this means is that our medical school will continue to be a magnet for strong physician scientists that will enhance our ability to deliver new cures, treatments, and care models for Minnesotans while preparing the next generation to serve communities across our state. The university is one of the largest producers of medical and public health research in the world, and the direct care medical impact of our university reaches every county of our state. I firmly believe, again, that the status of the U is one of the biggest issues we are facing this session because of the long-term consequences. Out-of-state control of our academic medical center will be detrimental to recruitment and retention of top healthcare talent. Today, U of M medical facilities are at the center of public health efforts in Minnesota. It is imperative that we keep this asset focused on the dedicated mission to healthcare education and to improve the health of all Minnesotans for generations to come. I have a niece who's a physician, university trained, of course, and is now in a fellowship at the U. And I have a niece who is a nurse at the U. Presently, I have a brother in a long-term clinical trial on diabetes at the U. And I have a sister in a clinical trial research study on treating ovarian cancer at the U. Members, I ask that you think about your family's health, your constituents' healthcare needs, and your responsibility as a member of this body to promote and protect the public interest of all Minnesotans as you vote on House File 402. And I humbly ask for your green vote. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill third reading.
Third reading, House File number 402.
Third reading. Discussion. I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. And, frankly, one of the issues I have in this bill is adding and concentrating power into one person in the Attorney General. But I'll let others address that. You can't treat patients if you're closed. In the opening statement by the author, they're talking about the things to take into account that a merger has to create, but it doesn't take into account if the merger doesn't happen and you've got an entity that's bleeding millions and millions and millions and millions, et cetera, of dollars. At some point, that entity will close. So when you look at merger, no merger, you need to look at what happens if and what happens if not. And frankly, it's not unheard of for hospitals and medical facilities to close. But it's not in the criteria to take in consideration, which is wrong. The other thing this bill does, it addresses symptoms. It doesn't address the underlying cause of why we have medical facilities bleeding money, not being able to stay afloat, having to merge with other ones to gain enough critical mass to survive a little bit longer. And that's what we as a body should be doing, is addressing the cause. Because treating the symptoms delays sometimes the inevitable. And frankly, I am disappointed this bill is not addressing the root causes, strengthening our medical network and system across the state. Because that is what we need to focus on, is having a strong medical system and network to be able to provide the care our citizens need. We could set a price of $1 for every visit. We could cap the cost of all medications. But then no one would get seen and no medicines would be delivered, because you can't do it. We're not an island. We're part of a nation. We're part of the world. And there are some realities that when you do things poorly, people and businesses and establishments and entities move elsewhere because that's the reality. And frankly, this bill, trying to address the symptoms, doesn't do anything to delay the further degradation of our healthcare system. So I'm going to vote no because I want us to actually start the real work to fix what needs to be fixed.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Nadeau.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members. Thank you, Representative Bierman, for bringing this bill, having this discussion. I don't think there's been a bill in front of the Health Committee more often and more frequently than this bill. I also don't think one has changed as much as it has since it started. Members, this bill started out as a concern that we were going to lose the U of M hospital to an out-of-state provider. And I think all of us were probably concerned with that, and that was where Governor Dayton, Governor Pawlenty came together and said, you know, we need to try to preserve this. They didn't have a lot to say about the rest of this bill, and I think that's where we run into some of the problems, Madam Speaker. The author was talking about what a green vote here will do today. What it won't do today is it won't improve access and it won't improve affordability in our healthcare system. And yes, our healthcare system is a little bit convoluted and it's complex. And it's complex for a reason. I mean, Minnesota is the envy of the nation when it comes to having the number of providers, the number of managed care organizations. You know, we have more than anybody in the nation. We're the top. Is it more complicated because of that? Maybe. I don't know. But we are the envy. You go to other states, they have one big plan and they have a public plan. That's it. That's all they have. I think more choice is far better. A green vote today on this bill, I think, is premature, members. And I mean no disrespect at all. There's a lot of details in this bill that have to be worked out. I said in committee, I'll say it again, the consequences of getting this one wrong is huge. You know, Representative Howard said in his closing statements, this is just the beginning. This bill right here, members, if you vote for this one, this is the end. This is the end of what we can do. And I'm just going to start going down some of the options. And I'm not going to take a ton of time because I think people have often made up their mind before they get here. And so I'm not going to waste a bunch of people's time. You know, there's nothing in this bill that's going to protect the U of M hospital. We want to pretend we can, but we can't. There's nothing in this bill that's going to find a new partner for the U of M hospital that's failing and the system that has partnered with it. But it's sure going to do everything it can to prevent an out-of-state provider from coming in and doing that without evaluating under, you know, well, I shouldn't say that. It will evaluate in time. I mean, if you read this bill, the amount of information that has to be provided to the Attorney General's office is magnanimous. It is, and there's no end to it. It basically, I'll point out on line 7.15, it's and also on 6.8, any other information requested by the Attorney General or Commissioner, any other. That's on line 6.8. And then again on line 7.15, any other information or documents requested by the Attorney General or Commissioner. Any other information. I mean, I would say that's a little vague. I'm not sure. You know, I think this bill confuses the purpose and the provision of what, and I totally respect the purpose that you're trying to achieve, Representative Bierman. I really do. Trying to make sure that we prevent transactions that create market domination. I'm with you. I think everybody here is. You know, or monopolies. I think everybody's here with you on that. But this bill goes too far. A green vote here is voting for massive, massive overreach by a particular office, maybe two, Department of Health and the AG's office, less flexibilities for hospitals, eye clinics, any doctors' organizations, as they try to stay solvent. And the one thing that we haven't talked about, and I think the author alluded to this a little bit, is that, and if he didn't today, it was in committee, that every resulting merger and acquisition has resulted in higher costs. And that's true. But I would submit that it was going to result in higher costs anyway. These organizations don't want to merge if they don't have to. They want to be able to operate. I appreciate the author has increased the number from 10 million, where it started, to 40 million. But a $40 million healthcare entity is a tiny entity. I mean, that will encapsulate some of our direct nonprofit service providers that literally provide services to our most vulnerable populations. It puts that in the same group as multi-billion-dollar managed care organizations. And let's not bypass the value of the managed care organization either. They do transportation services, they do translation services, they do so many things that work on improving health outcomes that, Representative Bierman would argue that's a public benefit, and we need to somehow, I don't remember where the language was, we need to have an equal value of that provided back to the state. I got to find that. It's on line 11.1. It starts on page 10, but 11.1. An amount equal to the value of any charitable asset the health maintenance organization or health system received from the state. Monetizing reimbursements to providing contracted services. I'm no lawyer. Maybe somebody wants to stand up and talk about this. I would venture to guess that that's going to be pretty tough. That's going to be pretty tough. So there's been a lot of energy and effort, members, trying to contribute to this bill because I think we agree on the purpose of it. I don't think it's ready. One of the last things that I know that we've talked about, and again, I do hope that your minds aren't made up. I do hope that you look hard at this bill and say, you know what? We don't need to pass this right now. We can work on this. We talked about a two-tier system that basically, if there are these organizations that meet a certain threshold, that meet a certain criteria, that get to this point where we need to evaluate that for sure. But we also need to balance that with making sure that our healthcare providers, our healthcare entities have the ability to believe in a stable environment. And this bill is tearing that underlying premise that this legislature has always had with those providers. It's tearing it apart. And for that reason alone, I wanted to vote for this bill. I did. I thought we could get there. I thought there was going to be enough time. I really wish it weren't here. I wish it weren't here now, because I think with a little more time, we could have a lot of support for this bill, Representative Bierman. I'm sorry to say, but today I'm a no. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the member from Carver, Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, Representative Bierman, you said that you wanted to retain a public asset in passing this bill. And I am terrified about losing a public asset in Carver County. And we've talked, but Ridgeview Hospital started in 1960 as the brainchild of a lot of the city leaders at the time, saying that there needed to be a hospital that was in Carver County, and it started off as a public hospital, morphed into kind of a public-private partnership. The city owns the underlying land, and the Ridgeview is running the organization, and that's how I came to be on their board when I was mayor. So I spent 4 years on their board. And I will tell you, members, that the people in Carver County are blessed by Ridgeview. So of the three Carver County legislators here, Representative Harder, Representative Ream, myself, Ridgeview is the largest employer in Carver County. largest employer in Carver County. I hope that folks recognize that. And they are the largest employer because they are dynamic. They are the largest independent hospital in the state. They have a lot of flexibility. They have branched out so that now Representative Farr has a piece of that. I think Representative Gilman has some in her district. McDonald has some, and many of you have pieces of Ridgeview all over the metro area. They have been creative. They have been leading edge. They have one of the most innovative and dynamic ambulance services. They have ambulance services that are on the road all the time, following up on people post-surgery so that they make sure that they are doing things like taking their meds, dressing their wounds, and things like that. So there's a lower rate of revisit to the hospital, which keeps both the hospital cost down and the cost to the patient. Ridgeview is fantastic. And I'll tell you, Representative Bierman, that as the largest hospital that's independent in the state, its innovation has set people around the country to looking at it. If you look at the 212 Medical Center that we share, Representative Ream, that is one of the lowest cost urgent care places in the state. And that model has been used or is being used in other states in our country. I am terrified about what this does because Representative Bierman came to my office and we talked, and I said, you know, this $40 million, if you're going to go buy a hospital, say in Arlington, where they bought one, $40 million bucks goes by like that. And I am concerned that somebody like the AG, who may have a different agenda, or who may not see it the same way that the private entity does that wishes to buy the other hospital, may shut that down. And you did say that that was a possibility. You said that the AG could make a decision that shut down an acquisition that's in your bill. So what frightens me is this, that if we have a failing hospital or a hospital that is really in need of some help, let's say the Arlington Hospital, they weren't doing the best, or you have a clinic that is out in many of the metro areas and they are interested in being purchased, that can be shut down. Well, what happens if that happens? Hospitals, if they cannot stay open and they cannot find someone who will merge or acquire them, they just shut the doors. So your quote of retaining a public asset to the people in the outstate effectively means that you may see the public asset disappear. Could go away altogether. And then people are driving further and further and further to have to get their care. And if it's urgent care, when minutes matter, and you need somebody who maybe is on a farm and they have to get to a local hospital, if that local hospital is gone, well, that doesn't really help us out much at all, does it? You know, I do understand your goal in this. I do. We talked, and we've talked a number of times in committee. I do understand the concern for your larger target here. And in your initial bill, you actually named them by name before you did a DE and brought in all this other language. But what you're doing is you're catching up smaller players into this potentially capricious network of decisions that get made or don't made, approved, disapproved, and shut down altogether. And I know that Representative Nadeau had a lot of questions when we were in state government finance. I'm not sure those ever actually got answered or fixed. My concern is ultimately for the people in my district first and foremost. Ridgeview is a phenomenal asset. You go down Main Street, Waconia, you ask someone, what do you think about Ridgeview? Chances are they're going to have glowing report. You go to somewhere out in Arlington, glowing report. LeSueur, glowing report. Fantastic care by solid people, trained well, care about our community, care about our people. The philanthropic effort of them is off the charts. What this bill does is it takes a lot of their flexibility away, and that terrifies me. So in your goal to, as you said, retain a public asset, my fear is that those public assets are going to be shuttered and it's just going to be an empty building. And people will drive by and say, well, that looks like an old hospital. What happened? And people will say, well, there was House File 402 that ultimately led to the demise of these small outstate hospitals that, for my side of the aisle, people depend on. They do. They depend on small hospitals that their business model may need some improvement, and an outside entity may come in and purchase them and keep that available to the community. But you were saying what the consequences of a red and a green vote are. Well, the consequences of a green vote are that small community hospitals in the outstate are going to be put in the crosshairs, potentially. And a green vote means that when you're trying to solve a larger issue, and again, you defined the larger issue in your first iteration of the bill. In the first engrossment of the bill, the two companies that you were the most concerned about were articulated by name in your bill. As it moved along, it became more obsequious as we went along. But I'm going to tell you, as the senior representative from Carver County, that it does not help Carver County at all. In fact, it should concern every member of the legislature down here from Carver County. It should concern every member that lives in, every resident that lives in Carver County, because it's going to severely handcuff the healthcare organization that operates in Carver County. So I hope to see that all of our Carver County members here today are voting red on this bill, because it is dangerous and could lead to some fairly capricious decisions being made that will adversely impact the day-to-day lives of people in Carver County. You know, when I was mayor, I heard from people, one of the reasons we moved here was, and you'd get a lot of things, the downtown is charming, the lake is fantastic. Every now and then they'd say, and the leadership is great, that was rare, but what I heard regularly was the health care provided here was off the charts. People who have babies in Ridgeview love it in Waconia and love it in Carver County. So members, I would urge you, think about the small community hospitals that you depend on or that you drive by. Vote no on this bill, because this puts places like Ridgeview and other small hospitals in the crosshairs, because if they are trying to be innovative and they're trying to be a leader in healthcare for people who need that service, you're taking away the tools in the toolbox. So members, vote no. I hope again to see our Carver County contingent voting no on this bill, because it will adversely impact the largest employer in our county. Vote red.
I recognize the member from Wright, Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. So as we've heard, the impetus of this bill is the Sanford U of M merger, Fairview merger. And yet, this bill, and it still lists it, Representative Nash, in here, not specifically Sanford, because now it says an out-of-state control, but it does say University of Minnesota, 2 pages worth of new language about the University of Minnesota assets. And yet, this bill did not come to the Higher Ed Committee. We talked about it in concept in the Higher Ed Committee. We raised concerns in concept in the Higher Ed Committee, but we did not see this bill. You know what else is wrong with this bill when we heard it in Ways and Means? That was the first time the fiscal note ever appeared. It went to the Health Committee, as Representative Liebling pointed out. It went to Health, Finance, and Policy 3 times, no fiscal note. It had 6 full hearings, no fiscal note. Again, members, this is a rushed bill. It has changed drastically. It has skipped important committees. The fiscal note did not appear until all of the policy and fiscal committees were all done. It literally went back to Representative Liebling's committee 3 times. She said that in Ways and Means, but it didn't have the fiscal note. It didn't even come to higher ed. We did learn in Ways and Means that the AG's office would have expanded power, which I also have concerns with. We spent quite a bit of time in Ways and Means talking about it, but it probably should have been talked about in State Gov 5 with Representative Nash. I don't know how much you talked about it there. But again, we should not be doing committee work on the floor. We can't take any public testimony. We can't have Dean Toller come and talk from the U of M. No public testimony. Can't have the Department of Health here to talk to us. We just have to figure it out. For those reasons alone, I'm going to be voting no. Because again, I don't even know how many times I've said this. We are not following the proper process. We're not, fiscal notes are not in fiscal committees. We're skipping committees. It's just haphazard, quickly put together stuff that will hurt the very people we're trying to help. So I'm going to be an absolute no just on that alone. And I don't even know the full parameters of what Representative Nadeau and Representative Nash had just said because I wasn't in those committees. Didn't even come to my committee in higher ed. I have no idea. Only came to Ways and Means, and we're limited with what we can talk about there. So once again, rushing through work, rushing through committees. You don't have all the information. Vote no, members.
I recognize the member from Chisago, Representative New Brinley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative O'Neill, good news, I'm going to give you lots more reasons to vote no. Because, boy, this bill is a doozy. I am wondering if Representative Bierman would yield to a question. And I apologize because we can't see each other across the chamber.
He will yield. Representative New Brinley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And like I said, Representative Bierman, I apologize. I can't see you over there. But I've got a couple of questions on the bill language. I don't see substantial changes to some of the concerns that we have expressed throughout the committee process. And I've been in multiple committees where we've heard the bill, and I have not seen substantial changes. So my first question, and I've got a few, and I'm hoping that he will yield for a few questions here, but on page 7, lines 7.17, 7.20, those two sections, it says the Attorney General can extend notice and the waiting period an additional 90 days, or they can waive all or any part of that notice. And I'm wondering, under what circumstances does the AG just get to either extend or waive those periods, those 90-day periods?
Representative Bierman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative New Brindley, for the question. 7.17, Attorney General may extend the notice and waiting period required would be, in most cases, if the pertinent information has not been received, they would extend that waiting period and request the further information to come in so that then they would have the time to review it. Also, the Attorney General may waive all or any part of the notice and waiting period required under paragraph B. There will be times when the Minnesota Department of Health and the Attorney General look at an entity that is doing a transaction. Let's say Ridgeview Hospital wanted to expand and they're doing outstanding work and they're the best small hospital in the state of Minnesota and they meet the requirements. They would not necessarily need to wait 90 days for the approval process. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative New Brinley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Bierman continue to yield?
He will yield. Representative New Brinley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, Representative Bierman, just for clarification, there's nothing in the language of the bill that lets us know under what circumstances the AG can choose to change that 90-day waiting period. Is there any objective criteria that these healthcare entities can look towards to plan for that?
Representative Bierman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The objective healthcare criteria would be the items listed in the bill. So when they are requested to provide information, I can almost see you if we pull that one stack off the table there. But if they have the criteria that is listed and they meet those criteria, then they are in good process, and be up to 90 days is what it may take, or it may be sooner.
Representative New Brinley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And would Representative Bierman continue to yield?
He will yield. Representative New Brinley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Bierman, can you point me to the language that explains that for us so that we can make sure that any healthcare entity can know exactly what they're facing?
Representative Bierman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I think, Representative New Brindley, you pointed to it, 7.17, Attorney General may extend, and 7.20, Attorney General may waive. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So to be clear, there is nothing in that language that says why the Attorney General may extend or waive. In fact, it is unilateral power given to the Attorney General with, frankly, no explanation to healthcare entities to be able to plan for that, whether it's going to be extended, waived, whatever. There is no objective criteria. Frankly, there's no criteria at all in that language. Would Representative Bierman continue to yield?
He will yield. Representative New Brindley.
Thank you. Representative Bierman, I'd like to go, I've talked to our folks on the Judiciary Committee, and it sounds like this is new language. I'm looking on page 10, and specifically lines 10.6 to 10.9, where it talks about why protected non-public data may become public. And, you know, this language typically applies to pretty extreme circumstances where maybe there has been an officer-involved shooting and there is rioting, and so officers can choose to disclose body camera footage or something. It typically applies to very extreme circumstances. I'm wondering if you can give us an idea of when we're talking about mergers, what might possibly create such an extreme circumstance that this protected data would become public?
Representative Bierman.
Madam Speaker, Representative New Brindley. You know, as far as what might happen where that would, I think that you're right, number one, that it would be an extreme circumstance, the likes of which, I mean, I can't even suggest a particular incident, but I think that it is something that we wanted in statute just in case there was a need for it. I think that that is language that we were advised should be included in the bill, and seem to make something that just as a placeholder, that if there was such circumstances, public disruption or something, that it was needed, that could be available. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And well, I'll be honest, Representative Bierman, it is extraordinarily concerning that, and when you say we were advised to put it in the bill, my curiosity is piqued on who might suggest that. Perhaps an attorney general would want that kind of power, I'm not sure. But this is only used in very extreme circumstances. And if we sitting in this room, if you as the bill author have not even considered what those circumstances might be, perhaps this is really dangerous language to have in a bill. We are talking about protected non-public data. Certainly in the state of Minnesota, we are very cautious with data sharing and making public data that is private. So this language is incredibly concerning. It was not included in earlier iterations. Would Representative Bierman yield for one more question?
He will yield. Representative Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Bierman, I'm looking at sort of the reasons to either enjoin or unwind a transaction as it's listed in the bill. And I'm wondering, one of the items that needs to be considered, and we've talked about this in committee and we've talked about it privately, is the increase in healthcare costs for patients. And as I look through the bill, I still don't see any protection or any consideration of what might happen to healthcare costs if a merger does not take place. Can you let me know if I am missing language, if that is here somewhere and I have just missed it, but that as part of all of these considerations that the Attorney General now has power to consider, the Commissioner of Health now has power to consider, is there any consideration of what might happen if a merger does not take place?
Representative Bierman.
Madam Speaker, Representative New Brindley, that is an excellent question, and it is one of the items that, as you mentioned, is on the list of healthcare costs that could go up. Also, if a merger did not take place, that is another reason, another consideration that would be considered by the Minnesota Department of Health and the AG's office as to why a merger should take place. If it's going to eliminate providers in an area that we don't have providers in or that is needed, that could be a reason to approve it despite other considerations. So that is certainly central to the bill, certainly central to the provision of the Health Department and the AG looking at these bills. I mean, I think we have to just from the get-go understand, members, that this bill is not looking to shut down health care in areas where it is needed. And so that certainly is a provision that would be considered public health, public interest, and a merger could proceed under those circumstances. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, it is certainly a relief to hear that the goal is not to shut down healthcare where it is needed, because certainly we are very concerned that that is exactly what could happen with this bill. Even things like, I mean, this is incredibly prescriptive, and reasons to unwind or enjoin might be that it would have a negative impact on the number of employees employed by an entity. So this bill language is literally saying if anyone would lose a job, if there is any negative impact, then that is a reason to stop a transaction from moving forward. Well, I hate to break it to you, but there are times when organizations are overemployed. They have more workers than they need to do the work they are doing. And sometimes that's exactly what puts organizations in a dangerous fiscal situation. And yet, that becomes problematic under this bill. Another something that Representative Nadeau hit on, this idea that the Attorney General now has extraordinary power under this language to request any other information or documents requested by the Attorney General or Commissioner. I actually don't think that this is vague at all. It might be the one time I'm going to disagree with Representative Nadeau. I don't think this is vague at all. I think it is crystal clear. It means the Attorney General and the Commissioner have extraordinary power, limitless power, to take whatever they want, to get whatever data, whatever information they want. This is extraordinary power that we are handing over to the Attorney General and the Commissioner of Health. It is extraordinarily concerning. I would also just, I just want to address, and I appreciate Representative Nash hitting this a little bit. You know, under this section that specifically, I know, it's kind of funny, we keep being told that, well, this isn't really about Sanford Fairview, but then that's what we hear about the whole time that it's talked about. It's been a little bit confusing that way. And then yet the bill language addresses the University of Minnesota very specifically. And I'll be honest, I'm a little frustrated by this because I feel like I was a little duped early on in this process when it comes to charitable assets. Because frankly, I thought, you know, that actually, there's some public interest there. That might actually be a matter of public interest. However, we weren't given the whole story. And so, while the University of Minnesota is specifically called out in the bill language, and that the University of Minnesota healthcare facilities shall not be owned or controlled directly or indirectly, in whole or in part, by a for-profit entity or an out-of-state entity, unless the AG gets to bless it. That's the only circumstance. The AG has to decide, well, they like it, so then it can move forward. But we really, a lot of the information has been left out of this conversation. So first of all, The East Bank facility of the University of Minnesota Health System was sold to Fairview in 1997. That's almost 30 years ago. That facility was sold almost 30 years ago. Did we have this conversation about charitable assets then? Because that would have been the appropriate time to have that conversation. That time passed a long time ago. And frankly, the West Bank facility has never been owned by the University of Minnesota. Never. It's not their building, it's not their property, it's not their hospital. They don't own it. And so when we talk about, quote, retaining public assets, I hate to tell you, Democrats, your socialism is showing. These are not public assets. These are private assets. And two entities have entered into a private contract, frankly, one that the legislature has no authority to intervene in. We have no authority over the University of Minnesota. It is a land grant institution that we have no authority over. And certainly Fairview is a private entity. We have no say in what they do. This, members, is bonkers. This idea that we're going to, quote, retain as a public asset something that has never been a public asset. This is bizarre. And this is the legislature inserting itself into transactions it has no business being involved in. And frankly, Representative Niska has not talked about all of the lawsuits that will come from this bill. He's been so good at laying out the many lawsuits we will be hearing because of what our Democrat colleagues have been doing this session. But certainly, this violates the takings clause of both the United States Constitution and the Minnesota Constitution. We have no authority to pretend that private assets are somehow public assets. We have no authority. And yet, today, the Democrats are going to pretend that we do. And this is a very dangerous road to go down. So beyond all of the unrestricted authority being given to an attorney general, beyond the unrestricted authority being given to a governor-appointed commissioner, we are inserting ourselves into transactions that we literally have nothing to do with. These buildings, the one building was sold 30 years ago. And frankly, the contract between Fairview and the University of Minnesota, I don't know if you guys are aware, it's up in 2026. That contract is almost done. And we're going to squabble over these assets? Guess what? They're not our assets to squabble about, nor are they the University of Minnesota's assets to squabble about. Members, this is an easy no vote.
I recognize the member from Traverse, Representative Backer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and we've had quite a few members share the concerns. I'm going to share the practical concern. We know Stanford has a good blueprint. If you just Google Stanford, you'll see hospitals and clinics starting up at Thief River Falls, all the way over to Bemidji, down to Worthington, up and down the whole border. And not just West Central, but in Central Minnesota, we see clinics. And Representative Nash talked about the concern of his hospital, rightfully so. I'm going broad in that further, and I know you and I have talked privately, and I have appreciated those conversations. You know, you did say about making sure that health care would stay good or something like that in all of Minnesota. We need it in all of Minnesota. Stanford has been a good player. Wheaton Community Hospital, most likely. I mean, I don't have a crystal ball. None of us on the House floor does. Sometimes we say will project the future, but if it wasn't for Stanford, we probably would not have had the Wheaton Hospital, Community Hospital, because they're a partner. They also work with Ortonville in Representative Anderson's district. They are up in Representative Murphy's district. They're up in Representative Bliss's district. Deb Keel's district, up and down. And my concern as a emergency medical technician is the run time. You know, I had a run not this Friday, but last Friday. It was a serious run. Unfortunately, it did not turn out like I wish it would. A very stressful run. But we were still out, the closest hospital is still out 20 minutes away. If we lose these hospitals, I'm going possibly to Breckenridge. I'm possibly going to Morris. Those are 45, 60 miles per hour, even if I'm driving, which I want to be because I have the highest level of training. I'm in the back of the rig doing what I need to do and so forth. So I'm really concerned with this $40 million figure. What we're going to do, Stanford, we have worked in the private sector. They have worked to help rural hospitals in west central Minnesota without the government interference. I'm not saying that there's not concerns about this, but again, this is why we have private markets. If it doesn't make sense, they're not going forward. Unfortunately, government, as we know, members, don't always know best. Generally, they don't know best. That's probably a better statement. I'm really concerned about how this is going to affect health care in west central Minnesota. Are we now going to say, are we going to all go to North Dakota and South Dakota now for our health care because we're exporting it, because they have less restrictions over there? These are questions. I have to agree. We heard earlier from a representative, this isn't ready. This is just not ready. I know you've worked really hard, Representative Bierman. You know, you've been working real hard, but this is not ready. I do not want to be in the back of an ambulance going 40, 45 miles per hour, especially with the run. 40, 45 miles away, especially with the run I had not this Friday, but the Friday before, where it was a life and death situation. So I'm going to be voting no for that for just the practical reason is what will it do to health care in Minnesota in our rural areas, and I'm quite concerned about that. So we're going to see larger regional, which then we have an attorney general, no disrespect, doesn't have any idea. And I'm not saying this attorney general, I'm talking about any future attorney generals also who doesn't understand, I don't think, the capacity of how to provide the best health care at a given situation. They have other skills. So I would ask members to vote no to help keep our health care where we have in Minnesota, because we do have a diamond, and I think this will export our diamond to the Dakotas. Thank you.
The member from Stearns, Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. If you are, well, let's start here. We're hearing a lot about the line such and such in the bill and line such and such and this and that. And gosh, that is just boring as all get up and go. If you're sitting at home watching this on television or watching this wherever you're watching it, even in the chamber, to be quite frank with you. Here's the reality of where the rubber meets the road on this bill. Once upon a time, there was a University of Minnesota hospital. That hospital wanted to get out of the clinic business and it wanted to get out of the hospital business. And so they asked for RFPs, requests for proposals, for people who would take those assets or businesses who would take those assets and manage those and become the owner of those. The suitor at that time was a clinic known as Fairview. Fairview worked with the University of Minnesota to be able to acquire those assets. Unfortunately for Fairview, there has been a legacy issue with that merger. The weight that Fairview bears in that merger is unsustainable. In the Commerce Committee, we had heard from Fairview. The representatives from Fairview said, we may go out of business. Let me say that again. Fairview said, we may go out of business. And so if you are a resident in the Twin Cities area, you should really be concerned about that last statement that I made. If you are getting your health care from the Fairview Network. I am not picking on Fairview. This is a matter of public record testified on in committee by the leadership of Fairview. They have, as Fairview, gone out and asked if there's anyone who's interested in a merger with Fairview. I can tell you exactly how many parties and other clinics and other providers in the state of Minnesota said, we're interested. And that answer is 0. The empty set, the null set, the goose egg, whatever you want to call it. The only party that stepped up was, as the bill language has changed, an out-of-state organization that would be willing to merge with Sanford. And the best thing that we can come up with today is a bill that's going to allow us to go on and do more research and to do more fact gathering. Well, Fairview's situation continues to worsen, and the patients who receive care from Fairview really may not have that opportunity. So let's play out scenario number 1. Fairview closes before we get our report back about what to do and how to address this. Those folks are still going to need care. So do you know where they're going to go? To other clinics around the Twin Cities area, or drive out to greater Minnesota, where we already have a shortage of medical providers. Wow. A shortage of medical providers. But yet this bill is striving to put stress on a situation that is not of the making of the parties of this contract, it is of the making of the legacy issues associated with this particular bill. There's a game that we used to play when we were kids. It was called Chicken. And that's what's going on here right now with the health care for folks who get their health care from Fairview. A mean, horrible, nasty game of chicken. Who's going to blink first? Those patients who are receiving cancer treatment, who are receiving new baby well care, tonsils, tubes in the ear, yeah, the routine stuff, are being put at risk because of politics in House File 402. Now, as I've sat here listening to this, I've also learned over the weekend that we've got another problem on our hands with the Mayo Clinic, having sent a stern letter to leaders in the state of Minnesota saying, stop playing chicken with us as well. Folks, the medical healthcare industry in the state of Minnesota is under a full assault right now. If you can hear my voice, do something about it. And all 134 members in this chamber can hear my voice. Let's do something about this. Madam Speaker, I would move that this bill be referred to the Committee on Higher Education and Policy, since it has not been heard. And from what I've been hearing on the floor today, that is the hang-up of what do we do with the legacy assets and the charitable assets that were gained by the University of Minnesota. Let's take care of this in the last 2 weeks that we have, so that we stop playing this mean game of chicken with the people who receive their health care from Fairview. And Madam Speaker, I would like a roll call, please. And again, that's the Committee on Higher Education, Finance, and Policy.
Seeing 50 hands, there will be roll call. Discussion on the motion to re-refer the House File 402 to Higher Ed. Representative O'Driscoll.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. I assume that by the silence in here that I might have been actually persuasive that you're going to go back and we're going to do committee work in committee, and we'll get the opportunity to be able to fix this so that we are going to be able to do this. Members, I encourage a green vote. This seems like the thing that will resolve the issue for us and will give us the chance to be able to do it. We had some good debate on the bill, so let's re-refer to the Committee on Higher Education. Let them work through the issues with the legacy assets and bring it back. And by gosh, you might even be able to get everybody in the chamber agreeing to support this. Thanks, members. I look forward to a green vote.
I recognize the author of the bill, Representative Bierman.
Madam Speaker, I advise members to vote no, please. Thank you.
See no further discussion. Oh, Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, thank you, Representative O'Driscoll. I probably should have made that motion myself since I made such a big deal about it not going to higher ed. This is a really important bill. It literally started because of this merger between the University of Minnesota Fairview system and Sanford, and yet it didn't even come to the Higher Ed Committee. And we did, like I said, we talked about this briefly with Jacob Tolar when he was there, Dean Tolar, and Myron Franz, but we didn't have this bill in front of us, and apparently it's had multiple iterations. I think it's the 4th engrossment. So it literally deals with the University of Minnesota system and its health care, and we didn't even see it. So members, please support the motion to re-refer.
Further discussion. Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 61 ayes and 70 noes, the motion does not prevail. Discussion to the bill. Representative O'Driscoll.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and members. Gosh, I had high hopes on this one, that maybe we were actually going to be able to solve this problem. I don't even know what else to say. I mean, we are literally playing a mean game of chicken with people in their health care in the state of Minnesota. And as I look out on the horizon, I see these gathering storm clouds that are out there. I see a little lightning and I hear a little thunder. Rest assured that those storm clouds, when they start coming our way, are going to rain down havoc like you have never seen in our healthcare industry if we continue down this road of playing chicken the way that we are. It's not going to be a climate change type of situation that some like to purport. It's going to be because of policy changes adopted by the majority in this body. I offered a real reasonable compromise because the issue that seems to be the juggernaut in this is the University of Minnesota assets. Gave you an opportunity to take it back to higher education and deal with those issues. And what did we do? We said, no thanks. Our bill to play chicken with Fairview and its patients, that's going to take priority. Members, I can only encourage you one more time to vote no on House File 402. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Further discussion. I recognize the author of the bill, Representative Bierman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, one thing we have clearly determined or presented is President Trump was right. Healthcare is complicated at every level with everything that is a component of healthcare, from pharmaceuticals to health insurance premiums, to ambulance, to hospitals and clinics and mergers. I'm sorry to say that this bill by itself doesn't solve all the complexity of healthcare, but it will begin to address what is on the horizon for us as a state of Minnesota with more and more mergers, acquisitions, equity funds, hedge funds, jumping in to the trough of healthcare spending as I mentioned at the beginning, we spend more in this country on health care than any other nation on earth, and we have poorer outcomes and shorter lives. That's not acceptable to me. It's one of the reasons I ran for office, in fact, was the high cost of health care for my business and my family and my friends and people I knew who really struggled with health care when 1 in 7 insurance claims are declined. And we have a lot of work to do. And this conversation, I hope, will engender more interest in more health care issues as we go forward. This bill will address some of the issues. HMOs are a real thing July 1st, members. There's a lot of money on the line that we need to make sure stays obligated to the state of Minnesota. Mergers and acquisitions continue to raise costs as they roll across the country, and they are coming to Minnesota too. It's interesting if you look at other healthcare structures around the world. How do they do what they do? Better health, longer lives, less money. What are we doing wrong? What can we learn from them? I would say a lot. And one of the things we're seeing across the country are states beginning to take mergers and acquisitions of health care seriously because they add costs to it. And if it's simply a question of this entity that has 11 hospitals can't possibly survive unless they get merged by somebody bigger than them, might you just not ask the question, how is it that a small hospital, and there are many across the country, I've found examples of small hospitals in rural areas and urban areas, one hospital, 250 beds, they're in the black. Not every hospital is losing money. How big do they need to be? Is merger the only option that they have? There's a lot of work to do here. There's a lot of things that this bill will begin to address. And I just want to say that, the Minnesota Department of Health and the Attorney General's office, their goal is not to close hospitals again. This got twisted over here somewhere where it created this fear that rural hospitals were going to be closed because of this bill. That's I don't even know what to say about that. This is a good bill. It's a needed bill. It will take Minnesota forward. It will keep our university foundational medical center intact that we in this state need in every county for the future of good health care in this state. Members, I ask you to vote green, please.
The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There be 70 ayes and 61 noes. The bill is passed and its title agreed to. Motions and resolutions. There are copies of non-controversial motions at the House desk and online. If there are no objections, we will take action on these motions first. Hearing no objections, the motions prevail. Announcements. I recognize the member from Martin, Representative Olson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members. Just wanted to take an opportunity real quick to remind you and re-invite you to the I-90 party, which is this evening, starting in 25 minutes at CHS Field. As one of my friends said, it's the second best get-together every session. I would tell you it's the first. Come have some Southern Minnesota hospitality. We'll have pork chops, courtesy of the Minnesota pork producers, and some excellent beverages that are brewed down there in our own territory in New Ulm. So thank you, members. We would love to see you there.
Further announcements. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Long.
Madam Speaker, I move that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 11:30 a.m. Tuesday, May 9th, 2023.
Representative Long moves that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 11:30 a.m. Tuesday, May 9th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The motion prevails. Representative Long.
Madam Speaker, I move that the House do now adjourn.
Representative Long moves that the House do now adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The motion prevails, and the House stands adjourned until 11:30 a.m. tomorrow.